This is interesting, because now we have ourselves two of my favorite teams having articles and conversations surrounding this one player that, we absolutely have to do it. We have to talk about whether or not the Montreal Canadiens or the Vancouver Canucks can get in on the action with Alexis Lafreniere, New York Rangers forward, and a player who has a very considerable update in regards to his trade status. You see, the New York Rangers and Alexis Lafreniere are in a pretty interesting spot. The Rangers didn't really do all too well this previous season, despite the fact that they had themselves the President's Trophy winning squad in 2023-2024. Alexis Lafreniere, 23 years old, signed on till the end of 2032, making $7.45 million a year, is a player who declined in point production. He had scored 12 fewer points and 11 fewer goals this previously completed season compared to last. He also was a point per game for the Rangers in the playoffs and was slowly starting to get into form as the guy that Rangers fans thought they were getting when they had selected him first overall in 2020. There was a concern about Lafreniere's foot speed and whether or not his offensive smarts and skills would fully translate into the National Hockey League when he was drafted, but those concerns weren't really strong enough to dissuade anybody from projecting him as the first overall talent. He did go first. He was absolutely league-defining in the QMJHL, but he hasn't had the same highs like some of the other players drafted after him, i.e. the Lucas Raymonds and the Tim Stützles. With this season, though, going the way it has for Alexis Lafreniere, we have ourselves some intriguing news as to what his status could be on the trade block. It comes to us via this tweet made by Arthur Staple, heard around the NHL Combine last week. The New York Rangers are among a handful of teams, alongside of Buffalo, Utah, and Seattle, that are looking to shake up their roster soon. Igor Shesterkin, Adam Fox, and Artemi Panarin may be the only untouchables for the Rangers in trade talks. Keep an eye out on Vladislav Gavrikov and the Rangers if Chris Drury can free up the space. There is the big conversation here, and okay, look, the top reply from Arpon, I know you're not framing it this way, however, as a Canucks fan, the fact that JT Miller could be traded is very funny. I just saw that. I wanted to toss that in here. Let's not talk about JT Miller and him getting traded one more time, but there is a conversation to have about some of the other forwards, like that same Alexis Lafreniere. In response to this tweet made by Arthur Staple, there have been articles published on HabsFanatics.com, for example, talking about whether or not the Canadiens can take advantage of this situation and potentially attract a name like Alexis Lafreniere to their team. There was also an article posted on The Athletic by Harmon Dale and Thomas Drance featuring Vancouver Canucks trade targets, 14 top 6 forwards who could boost Vancouver's attack. There is a detailed write-up about Alexis Lafreniere in this article. Let's talk about the Montreal thing first, because I think that is the maybe the easier one to talk about. Yeah, if the Habs get into a spot where they move away from Patrik Laine and his $8.7 million AAV contract, if there needs to be a replacement on that left side, Alexis Lafreniere can be that guy. Now, of course, I think a lot of Canadiens fans are kind of scratching their heads and wondering, like, okay, well, if Lafreniere is available, why would the Canadiens go after him? He's not a center. He can't play that position. And yeah, that is true. There are a number of things that Lafreniere cannot do that the Montreal Canadiens need out of some of their new acquisitions. But because the Lafreniere discussion has been relevant enough for the Montreal Canadiens, anytime Lafreniere's name comes up in trade rumor discussions, you always see at least some folks going out there and saying, hey, Montreal, they should bring this guy back to Quebec. Obviously, a first overall Quebecois getting drafted and developed and eventually finding himself in Montreal is a story for the ages. But whether or not it's actually what Montreal needs at this point that's an entirely other discussion, and you can definitely say it probably isn't likely. However, that's not going to stop people from talking about it. As I had said, there were articles written about this. If you search up Lafreniere's name on Twitter and you search Habs, you will see a bunch of folks going out there and discussing Lafreniere being a Montreal target. It just seems to be one of the names that folks go out there and automatically try to put the pieces into. Now, if we go over to the Vancouver Canucks, this is also intriguing. The article on The Athletic is paid for material, so we're not going to go out there and screenshot that. Instead, Edward Jackson took some of the commentary made by Harmondale and Drance and posted it onto CanucksDaily.com. Ignore the clickbaity title. Let's just go out there and read what Dale and Drance wrote about. Alexis Lafreniere would instantly become the Canucks' best winger if he can return to the form he had showed in 23-24, and he could shatter his previous 57-point career high if he's given the first unit power play opportunity he has not received in New York. And that is an idea that I think you have to consider when discussing Alexis Lafreniere as a potential Vancouver Canucks target. There also is the internal connections here, the fact that Emily Castonguay, Vancouver Canucks assistant GM, was Lafreniere's former agent. And you gotta wonder if Lafreniere and Castonguay, if there's a little bit of a connection that can sway Patrick Allvin one way or another into trying to get this guy onto their team. It wouldn't be the first time that Vancouver probably would have asked about Lafreniere. There were all these rumors talking about K'Andre Miller and Lafreniere and other names like Zibanejad and all that in the JT Miller trade conversations. Guess what? Vancouver walked away with Filipino, a first, and Victor Mancini. So maybe Lafreniere to Vancouver is not a new idea. We've been talking about this for years, literally, back when the Canucks were contending for the draft pick that would have been used to select Lafreniere. We were already discussing whether or not that was possible. But the article on The Athletic, Drance and Dale, they also say that for a guy like Kaapo Kakko, for example, who went from New York over to Seattle, he has had a very good explosion of offense, and he has started to look really good. That's just Seattle we're talking about here. There are a number of guys in that organization who have started to look good, like Shane Wright, for example. So the theory is if Kaapo Kakko can go from one team to another where he's given a bigger opportunity and he looks better, could Lafreniere go through the same story here? And could Vancouver potentially be that team that gives him that opportunity and that allows him to thrive? Is it Vancouver? Is it Montreal? There are a bunch of conversations to happen here, but it seems like, based off of the Arthur Staple report, that Alexis Lafreniere may not be untouchable in this situation. Seems like there are only three: Igor, Fox, Panarin. Everybody else, Kreider, Zibanejad, K'Andre Miller, JT Miller, Brennan Othmann, Lafreniere. Seems like everybody is, in some capacity, up on the market. So with that in mind, I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Alexis Lafreniere, yay or nay? If you're a Canucks fan, a Canadiens fan, let me know in the comments, how do you feel about this idea, and do you think it's actually worth exploring for our favorite Canadian teams over here? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Alexis Lafreniere. What do you think the trade price is? Do you think it's worth it to grab this guy? Do you think your teams would benefit? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.